how are you? Today I am going to start our new topics and our new chapter. Our new chapter is the chapter 9 and this chapter's headline is Firmness and Locomotion. Here's the firmness and locomotion. Here are the two types or two topics. First structure is the skeleton, basically human skeleton, and second structure is the muscles. Today I am going to start our new structure and new topics is the skeleton. Here's the skeleton. There are basically bone, cartilage, ligaments, bone joint, etc. And today I am going to start this structure is basically bone, cartilage and bone joint. First, in the human structure, I just introduced this structure. Basically, please everyone see the books and this. First, the human skeleton is composed of a combination of 206, please underline this structure, 206 long, small plate and equal bones. Basically, in the human structure, there are the various categories of bones. Basically, small, some bones is the small and some is the flat and some is the unequal bones or long. It gives the definite shape to the body and protects the internal organs. Internal organs like heart and the structure of lungs, stomach, intestine, brain, etc. The number of bones in a child skeleton is more than the adult. It's also the another structure. Without a strong bony structure, a fixed shape is not possible. All bones and associated parts together constitute the skeleton. I just give the example just like the hands. Here the structure, first structure is the ulna, radius and the tarsal, metatarsal and the phalanges. Again I repeat, in the hands there are the exceptional bones or the various types of bones. First structure is the ulna, second is the radius, third is the carpal and metacarpal and the phalanges. This structure is basically phalanges. In the same types of the legs, here the various types of bones. First structure is the tibia, fibula, femur and the tarsal, metatarsal and the phalanges. Bones and bone joints. Both are the parts of a skeleton. Bone joints are connected together with the various parts of the skeleton and assist in movement. Basically, bone joints help us to the movement. Bones remains attached with voluntary muscles. Again, underline this structure. There are basically three types of muscles. First is the involuntary muscles, second is the voluntary muscles, and third is the cardiac muscles. But in the formation or locomotion, here's the muscles is very important muscles, basically voluntary muscles that helps the movements of different organs. The skeletal system is composed of first structure is bones, second is the cartilage, third is the ligaments, fourth is the tendons, bone joints and muscles. Basically, this structure is the formation of the skeleton. Here are the types of skeleton. Basically, human skeleton is divided into two types. First is the exoskeleton and second is the endoskeleton. What's the types of exoskeleton? Basically, exoskeleton, the parts of the skeleton that exist outside the body. And the example is the neck, hair, etc. Again, the endoskeleton, the part of the skeleton which cannot be seen from outside is called endoskeleton. Actually, skeleton means the endoskeleton inside our body. The endoskeleton is mainly composed of cartilage and bones. Role of skeleton in firmness and locomotion. First role is the structure and firmness of the body. Second is the very important It's also the protection. They are the protect this the soft structure basically inside stomach, brain, etc. Third is the movement and locomotion. Fourth is the production of red blood cell. It's also the another very important types. Five is the storage of mineral salts. Basically in the mineral salts, calcium, potassium, phosphorus, etc. They also stored. And students, our next structure is the bone, cartilage and the bone joint. First structure is the bone. What is the bone? Please everyone see the books about the bones. First, the bone is a modified form of connective tissue. It is the strongest tissue of the body. The matrix of the bone or intercellular substances of the bone is composed of organic compounds. Here the compounds there are the 40% is the organic compounds and the 60% is the inorganic compounds. Okay, different kinds of bone diseases occurs if the balance, decay and development is disturbed. In later age, bone decay is relatively higher than bone formation. Bones are mainly composed of different compounds of phosphorus, sodium, potassium and calcium. It contains approximately 40 to 50%. Living bone cells contains, again I repeat, living bone cells contains 40% is the organic compounds and the 60% inorganic substances. To develop bone cells, vitamin D and calcium, basically two main structure is the bone construction is the vitamin D and the calcium. Intense foods are needed. Due to the deficiency of these substances, normal growth. Here's the normal growth, bones is resisted. Then the sunlight hits. I also explain how can the vitamin D is the produced. First, the sunlight hits the cholesterol of the skin and brings some changes which the turn brings some gradual changes in the liver and kidney, and thus through this continuous process vitamin D is synthesized. So it is necessary to come in contact with the adequate sunlight. Now our next structure is the cartilage. Cartilage, basically cartilage is not just hard like bone. These are relatively soft and elastic or flexible. It is a different form of the connective tissue. These cells are found basically solitary or in pairs and are densely scattered out within the matrix. From the cartilaginous tissue, a kind of hard semi-transparent organic substance is secreted. This is called chondrin. Matrix is composed of chondrin. It is light blue in color. In living cartilaginous cells, the protoplasm is transparent with a round nucleus and cavity is noticed within the chondrin. These are called capsules or lacunae. I just draw this structure basically. In the cartilage, this structure is this structure, and this structure is basically chondroblast and it's also the lacunae. Here's the lacunae, chondrocyte and chondroblasts are inside it. All cartilage is enclosed by a layer of fibrous connective tissues that is called perichondria. All the cartilage cells, basically it's also the layer. This structure is perichondrium. And this layer is glazing white in color, so cartilage looks white, bluish and glazy shining. There are various types of cartilage within the body. Example, the cartilage in the pinna. Here's the pinna. And cartilage is found in different joints or in the inter-articulating surface of some of the bones. Dear students, And the next structure or next topics is very important topics for your final exams. Basically this structure is bone joint. Here's the bone joint. This is the another example is synovial bone joint. Here's the bone joint or articulation. The joints between two or more than bones are called bone joints. In every joint, bones are joined firmly together by flexible elastic tissues called ligaments. So the bones cannot be dislocated easily. The joint helps in the movement of limbs. All the joints of our body are not of the same type. Some are fixed, example, invertebrate joint. Some are freely movable, example, joints of hands and the legs. Synovial joint. This structure is important structure. I just draw this the synovial structure. Please everyone see this. The synovial structure I also draw in the board. Here first I just draw the spongy bone and the strong bone. This structure is first structure is the spongy bone and the strong bone. First this structure is one bone and the another structure is the bone. They are the two bones. In the last layer, this structure is basically cartilage. And synovial. This structure is synovial cavity. Where is the synovial cavity? Basically, this structure is the synovial cavity. And last structure is which the connect this structure is basically ligament. And I just draw the synovial bone joint. Here's the synovial fluids and a covered capsule which is a tough fibrous tissue or ligaments that firmly holds the joint. The synovial fluid, here's the synovial fluid. The synovial fluid and the cartilage of the joint reduces friction so that less energy is consumed for movement of joint. So this structure is here. This structure is basically spongy bones. This structure is spongy bones, and this structure is hard bones and the strong bones. And articular capsule. Here's the articular capsule. Basically, this structure is the articular capsule. There are two types. First type is fibrous membrane and the second type is the synovial membrane. And these two types also add the articular capsules. And the last structure, this structure is basically cartilage. Here, bone joints are of different types. First is the fixed joint. In the bone joint, there are basically three types. First is the bone fixed joint. Second is the slightly movable joint. And third is the freely movable joint. In the freely movable joint, there are basically again another two types. First type is ball and socket joint. Second is the hinge joint. Again, I also explain it. First is the fixed joint. First is still the fixed joint. Fixed joint. The bones are joined firmly, so it is immovable. Example, joint of the cranium. Second structure is slightly movable joint. These joints are joined with one another and has a small sliding surface, so we can bend the body. For example, joint of backbone. Here's the backbone is basically the slightly movable joint. Third structure, freely movable joint. Here's the freely movable joint. These joints can be moved easily. For example, hinge joint, synovial bone joint and socket joint is only freely movable joint. Here's the freely movable joint. There are also the two types. First type is ball and socket joint. Joints where the round one head of the bone fits into a cup-shaped socket or cavity of another bone is such a way it allows the bone's movement in all planes. This is also a type of synovial joints. For example, shoulder joint, ball and socket joint of thigh bone. Second structure, hinge joint. What is the hinge joint? Basically, the elbows, knees, joints of the finger are the examples of hinge joints. It moves like a hinge of a door. It can be moved in one plane only. These are also examples of synovial joints. Dear students, today I just only give you the bone, cartilage and synovial or the bone joint. Everyone learn this attentively and please everyone draw this structure is basically this structure is synovial bone joint. Thank you today.